Feel outside when you're in and inside when you're out with a Crocodile glass veranda. A solid open structure with a glass roof, it's quickly and easily constructed using powder-coated aluminium. So it's maintenance-free and built to last. Call 08000 112200 to find out more about the elegant, bespoke Crocodile glass veranda and improve your family home Crocodile style.
See that alpaca? That was me. Some online casinos treated me unfairly.
Typical.
Then I discovered a fair casino that pays all bonuses in cash. And now I've found my Ojo. Find your Ojo at playojo.com.
Play Ojo.
The Welsh Assembly is to hold a debate on the dumping of hundreds of thousands of tonnes of sediment near Cardiff from the construction of a nuclear power plant across the water in Somerset. It comes after activists concerned about radioactive contamination from so-called nuclear mud from the Hinkley Point C site threatened a legal challenge. But they dropped their case ahead of the proposed debate on the 10th of October. The campaigners argue the material was not properly tested before being disposed of on a sandbank just beyond the city of Cardiff. But EDF Energy, the company building the plant, says there's nothing to worry about.
The claimant's decision to drop the case is good news for a project that is vital for the UK's energy future and provides work for 25 Welsh companies and 1,000 Welsh workers. The mud is no different to mud found anywhere else up and down the coast, and it has been thoroughly tested by independent experts who confirmed it poses no threat to human health or the environment. The sediment is not classed as radioactive under UK law.
Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by Keen Kieran, a member of the Welsh band Super Furry Animals and one of the activists calling to stop the sediment dumping. Keen, evening to you.
Good evening.
So you're a musician. What is it about this nuclear power plant project that interests you?
Well, I grew up on the island of Anglesey, and for those who don't know, I grew up in the shadow of Wilver, which is another nuclear power station. I then moved down to Cardiff 25 years ago, and I've lived in the shadow of Hinkley ever since. I think Wales has been in the nuclear siege.
They may be nuclear power plants, but they're not dangerous, are they?
Pardon?
They may be nuclear power plants, but they don't pose any danger. You've had no problems living close to ones in the past, and what's the problem with the one at the moment?
I think that history speaks for himself. I think I can't even believe I've just heard the question, to be honest.
Right, what has happened in this country with nuclear power stations, and indeed the argument that you're concerned that land surrounding a nuclear power station in this country would be contaminated and be radioactive?
No, what we're asking is for the mud to be adequately tested, and the precautionary principles should dictate a rethink by the Welsh politicians and the policymakers to do the right thing by their people. I think that's a reasonable request, to be honest.
Has not the right thing been done? EDF says they've tested the earth several times. It's not radioactive, they say. The Welsh Government says it's not radioactive. So does Natural Resources Wales. So really, what evidence do you have to make you think otherwise?
You think you have to ask yourself where these standards come from. They are set by the IAEA, which NRW will claim they are required to abide by. We argue, or I would argue, that the Welsh Government will go further. The Welsh law on the Environmental Wales Act of 2016 goes further and requests that evidence should be gathered in respect of any uncertainties. So we now know, we established through the courts, and the disputes process that there is no EIA for the Cardiff grounds, and therefore you could argue that the Welsh Government are breaking their own laws.
OK, so talking about law, there will be no legal action pursued right now because you have this debate. Now, are you confident that the debate you'll have in the Welsh Assembly will go your way and your concerns will be listened to and the evidence you pertain to have will be listened to?
I'm confident that common sense should and will prevail. I mean, as I've just explained, there is no EIA. There are unanswered questions, and it's only reasonable and responsible, for that matter, for the Welsh Government to do right by its people. That's what they're put in power to do.
But the Welsh Government is doing right by its people. I mean,
the person to be on Russia Today talking about this, you know, it's not my job.
No, it's great. I'm glad you are talking about it.
Exactly, but ask yourself, why are we in this predicament?
Well, you're explaining to us your concerns on this. The interesting thing is, of course, this project is supporting the livelihoods of Welsh employees. Many people could have their jobs in jeopardy over what many would say are spurious claims.
Well, we know for a fact that like-for-like investment in the renewable or green job creation will increase the job creation. So like-for-like investment, for example, in wind will give you 12 times more jobs, solar 300, the countless more in efficiency measures. So I think the job argument is tired. I think the moral argument is unjustifiable. The economic argument is unjustifiable. It's a bad deal. If you want to tackle climate change, then you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck through investing in renewables. So it's political will and lack of foresight that has brought us to this position. That's not a reason to carry on recklessly.
Cian, great to hear your thoughts tonight. Thank you very much for your time. Cian Kieran.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
An unprecedented court case could see historic changes to the rights of transgender parents. If successful, it would mean a biological mother may no longer be required on a child's birth certificate. At the centre of the legal battle is a single parent who became pregnant, but since childbirth has been legally registered as a male and undergone surgery. He wants to be identified as the father or parent and says that not being allowed to do so violates his human right to privacy and family life. The law, however, states he must appear as the biological mother on the birth certificate. And all that is preventing him from receiving welfare and state benefits, among other things. While this is a unique case, since 2016, the US state of California has given parents the choice to pick between being known as mother, father, or simply parent. Should Britain do the same? We asked political commentator David Vance and human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell.
The question this case raises is, who should be on the birth certificate? Should it necessarily be mother or father, or could it just be parent? I think that it's not really important for legal reasons or any other practical reason why it has to be a mother.
Peter's just said this. Let's remove mother from the birth certificate and replace it with something more non-specific, such as parent. But mothers give birth to kids. Sorry, spoiler alert, that's how it's been, that's how it's always going to be, and no amounts of debate are going to change that biological fact.
Why not just make a reasonable accommodation in these small number of cases to acknowledge this person as the parent, so the child will know that this person is their parent legally as well as in reality. This
child would become the first child in the history of this country, and I believe anywhere else, who on their birth certificate the word mother is missing. So just consider this for a moment. Can you imagine the psychological damage that this would impact that child?
You know, the child will probably find it different and unusual, but as we've seen with same-sex parents, children get a handle on things pretty quickly. Love is about, you know, a parent's commitment and care for a child. what's on the birth certificate really doesn't affect that love and commitment.
In those instances that you've mentioned, same-sex couples, regardless of the configuration, the child was always born to a woman. Simple biological fact. You know what I mean? That's not being judgmental. It's a foundational fact that we must not run away from just because it might hurt some people's feelings.
There have been some trans men in a similar situation who have given birth, and they have accepted that they should be named as the mother. So this case is unique and it's different. But I think the number of instances that will be involved in a similar circumstance is so tiny, we should not get het up about it, and we should just make the accommodation.
But Peter, Peter, the law is not based on exceptions. The law must apply to all. You just can't operate it the way that you'd like to. So the fact of the matter is that this child was born to a woman, and therefore the birth certificate should reasonably reflect that reality.
The US ambassador to
They'll win again. They'll win again.
Yeah. Big thanks to my guest, Tom Berenger. Be sure to see Tom in the upcoming film American Dresser, in theaters September 21st. As always, you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. See you next time.
These are Select Spec £6 a pair prescription glasses. And this?
It's the sour face of our competition. Sour face because they just can't compete with our prices.
But you don't have to be so bitter. Select Spec £6 a pair brand new prescription glasses are so much cheaper than a lot of high street specs.
They are easy to order, and every pair comes with scratch-resistant and anti-glare coatings included in the price.
So now you could afford a different pair of glasses for every day of the week.
Glasses like these.
Or these.
Or these.
Or these.
Don't be bitter. Get a sweet deal on your prescription glasses with Select Specs.
To get your prescription glasses for just £6 a pair with scratch-resistant and anti-reflection lens coatings as standard, simply select your frames, send us your prescription, and let us do the rest. SelectSpecs.com.
Feel outside when you're in and inside when you're out with a Crocodile glass veranda. A solid open structure with a glass roof, it's quickly and easily constructed using powder-coated aluminium. So it's maintenance-free and built to last. Call 08000 112200 to find out more about the elegant, bespoke Crocodile glass veranda and improve your family home Crocodile style.
See that alpaca? That was me. Someone like casinos treated me unfairly.
Typical. Then I discovered a fair casino that pays all bonuses in cash. And now I've found my Ojo. Find your Ojo at playojo.com.
Play Ojo.
C'est que si elle parle à quelqu'un, il risquerait de mourir ou de devenir fou. C'est un secret de l'Église.
A church secret indeed. Catholic priests accused of sexually abusing children can get away with it, quite literally.
I like to call this the geographic solution. So what the bishop needs to do then, he finds out that the priest is a perpetrator. He simply moves him to a different spot where the previous scandal is not known.
The highest ranks of the Catholic Church help conceal the accused priests from the police and justice.
Sua Santidad, en el caso Gracia, intentando influir a la justicia argentina.
Expose the truth. Protect the children. Expose the truth.
It's 10 o'clock, live from central London. This is RT UK.
This is the moment to chuck checkers.
Supporters queue round the block to see Boris Johnson's speech at a fringe event at the Tory party conference in Birmingham, as he again urges Theresa May to abandon a controversial Brexit plan. Home Secretary Sajid Javid is accused of attempting to upstage Boris with an overhaul of his party's immigration policy, including an end to free movement of EU citizens after Brexit. The Welsh Assembly vows to debate the dumping of so-called nuclear mud from the construction of a power plant after pressure from environmental activists. We get reaction from independent Welsh Assembly member for South Wales Central, Neil McAvoy. And also this hour, historians fight over whether the Oliver Cromwell monument outside Parliament should be removed, as some accuse him of anti-religious zeal and excessive violence. We hear from both sides of the debate. Good evening. Former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has been speaking at a packed-out fringe event during the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. He continued his crusade against Theresa May's Chequers Brexit plan, calling on the government to throw it out once and for all.
And now, therefore, is the time truly to take back control and follow that vision, make the elegant, dignified and grateful exit the country voted for. This is the moment. This is the moment to do that. And there is time. This is the moment to chuck Chequers.
RTUK's Ali has more from the conference in Birmingham.
Well, there aren't many who would say that. The former Foreign Secretary is the shy and retiring type, and he certainly wasn't today. He, of course, was giving his speech there to Tory party members, and at the same time as the Home Secretary Sajid Javid was speaking to the main hall at the conference, talking about his crackdown on immigration, his migration reforms, and the crowd for Mr. Javid, a lot smaller, a lot more sparse than that were queuing up for Mr. Johnson. There were 2-hour queues waiting to see the former Foreign Secretary speak and to hear exactly what he had to say about Brexit. And when he arrived on stage, he started off by saying that the biggest threat to the United Kingdom wasn't Iran or Russia, it wasn't even the opposition and Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, but it was, as he put it, the possibility of Britain squandering the opportunity, as he puts it, which has been given by Brexit. He also unpredictably was critical yet again of Theresa May's Chequers plan and criticising it, saying it went against the decision that the voters made during that referendum 2 years ago.
It would mean that whatever the EU came up with in future, banning the sale of eggs by the dozen, banning diabetics from driving, banning vaping, whatever, and all those have been at least considered by Brussels in the last few years. All this nonsense we would have to implement with no ability to change or resist. That is not pragmatic. That is not a compromise. It is dangerous and unstable, politically and economically. My fellow Conservatives, this is not democracy. That is not what we voted for.
As far as Johnson is concerned, Theresa May has succeeded only in uniting left and right, Leave and Remain, against her Chequers plan. And he also said that it's given a boost to those who want to see a second referendum.
We cannot tell the Scots that they've made a decision to reject independence for a generation in their referendum, and then ask the UK population to vote again on the EU. The idea of a second vote is infamous, but the obvious democratic fragility of the Chequers proposals will only intensify such calls.
Now, that speech there by Johnson was hosted by Conservative Home, and they've ranked him as being one of, if not the best placed Tory figure to potentially take over from Theresa May. But it isn't Tory members who Mr. Johnson needs to convince. It's those of the general public, and we were out on the streets of Birmingham early today asking people what they thought about the possibility of Boris Johnson being the next Prime Minister.
It won't happen. He's talking sense, but it won't happen.
I think it's cool. Yeah. We need like a leader who will stand on one side and defend it.
Oh God, what a nightmare. No.
Why?
Because he's so self-indulgent.
I'm sure he's a very clever man, and I appreciate that he's got lots of things, but I think sometimes are a little bit too strong for me. Perhaps it's my age. What do you think?
I agree.
The Prime Minister, Theresa May, predictably asked about whether she had seen the speech. She called it a good show and admitted that she hadn't seen everything that Boris Johnson had to say. But let's see what the Prime Minister says when she addresses the Tory party conference tomorrow.
Well, Tory MPs may not be supporting Boris, but some key MPs are. Leader of the DUP, Arlene Foster, commended Boris Johnson's belief and spirit and renewed her commitment to propping up the Conservatives with her 10 MPs.
I do get very frustrated about some people in the Conservative Party. Look, it's happening, so therefore let's make it as good as we possibly can instead of all this talk about a people's vote. Whoever leads the Conservative Party, we will work with as it's in the national interest. The reason we signed the agreement was to ensure Brexit.
Theresa May's ally in Westminster also said the Good Friday Agreement should not stand as a barrier to the final Brexit deal. Foster agreed to a confidence and supply deal with the Tories after last year's general election, where the DUP agreed to back Theresa May on key votes and said that the deal would stand even if May was replaced. Meanwhile, EU Brexit coordinator Guy Verhofstadt warned his European colleagues against caving in to the demands of the Prime Minister's divided government at a critical time in the negotiations.
We will never undermine the principles of the Union, the European project, to rescue a political party in Britain who is not even capable to find a common line on the exit of the mess of Brexit.
Earlier, I was joined by political strategist John McTernan, and I asked him if Boris Johnson is making a bid for power.
Oh, look, it was definitely a leadership bid, and it was pure Johnson right down to he cited a 14th century law which he thought that the Prime Minister was breaking in the way she was negotiating with the European Union. It was classic Johnson, and the party members clearly love him, queuing for hours to get and see him. They raised the rafters when he said chuck checkers. It was a clear declaration of war. And then with Arlene Foster from the DUP coming in and backing Boris, you have to say he's now got a case he can make to MPs, which is that I can still construct a majority. We don't need a general election if I'm the leader. If the DUP have faith in me, we don't need to have an election until 2022, and I bet there's lots of Tory MPs who do not want a quick election.
Well, as a former advisor to a Labour government, Boris Johnson himself coming up with a rival Brexit plan, which is more than Labour's come up with, isn't it?
Oh, well, Labour are an opposition. Their job is to oppose. Their job is not to help the government, it's to keep the government in its misery. And I think that's been the Keir Starmer strategy, which is...
But they say they're a government waiting to be elected, waiting in the wings after their latest conference. They were full of vim and vigour for that, weren't they?
Yeah, waiting to do everything apart from Brexit. I think don't interfere with the government while they're making a mess of this, and then hope that if they form a government, I'm sure Jeremy Corbyn's first act is to phone the European Union and say, can we have a bit more time? Maybe have a time out?
Well, interesting enough, what Boris Johnson's done now, hasn't he? He's probably made the EU sit up and think that they should concede and accept Theresa May, or at least a Theresa May compromise checkers plan, because Boris Johnson's going for that hard Brexit. Indeed, this could all lead to a no-deal situation. So in some ways, ironically, is Boris Johnson helping Theresa May get a good deal out of the EU?
Well, yes and no. If the European Union watched that, they'd be thinking, oh my goodness, we'll have to help her because she's in terrible straits. However, Boris is just making a claim that he speaks for a chunk of MPs. Is it up to 80 Tory MPs say that they will vote against checkers or whatever plan Theresa May puts forward? And so it doesn't really matter what compromise or deals that you come to with Theresa May. She won't get through the House of Commons. Labour will vote against, 80 Tory MPs will vote against, maybe the DUP vote against. What the European Union must be hoping for is a government of national unity where they have Prime Minister Theresa May, Deputy Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn coming in to negotiate with them.
As we mentioned earlier, Home Secretary Sajid Javid unveiled the UK's new immigration policy at the Tory party conference today.
What people want and what they will get is control of our own immigration system, with a lower and sustainable level of net migration. And above all, that has to mean one thing: an end to freedom of movement.
The new policy would see workers from the EU treated the same as those from other countries, with priority given to the more highly skilled. Employers will be encouraged to prioritise British labour. Javid also promised a new tougher British values test for immigrants to replace the current one, which he compared to a pub quiz. The EU has lashed out at the proposal, saying it will not accept discrimination based on skills and nationality. Still to come this hour, the Welsh Assembly is set to debate the dumping of so-called nuclear mud off the coast of Maine as it concerns sediment from the Hinkley Point power station construction site poses a health risk. We hear from Welsh Assembly member Neil McAvoy. And also this hour, historians are embroiled in a row over whether the statue of Oliver Cromwell deserves its place outside the Houses of Parliament. We bring you both sides of the debate.
See that alpaca? That was me. Someone like casinos treated me unfairly.
Typical. Then I discovered a fair casino that pays all bonuses in cash. And now I've found my Ojo. Find your Ojo at playojo.com.
Feel outside when you're in and inside when you're out with a Crocodile glass veranda. A solid open structure with a glass roof. It's quickly and easily constructed using powder-coated aluminium, so it's maintenance-free and built to last. Call 08000 112200 to find out more about the elegant, bespoke Crocodile glass veranda and improve your family home Crocodile style.
The Welsh Assembly is to hold a debate on the dumping of hundreds of thousands of tonnes of sediment near Cardiff from the construction of a nuclear power plant across the water in Somerset. It comes after activists concerned about radioactive contamination from so-called nuclear mud from the Hinkley Point seaside threatened a legal challenge. But they dropped their case ahead of the proposed debate on the 10th of this month. The campaigners argue the material was not properly tested before being disposed of on a sandbank just beyond the city of Cardiff. But EDF Energy, the company building the plant, says there's nothing to worry about.
The claimant's decision to drop the case is good news for a project that is vital for the UK's energy future and provides work for 25 Welsh companies and 1,000 Welsh workers. The mud is no different to mud found anywhere else up and down the coast, and it has been thoroughly tested by independent experts who confirmed it poses no threat to human health or the environment. The sediment is not classed as radioactive under UK law.
Independent Welsh Assembly member for South Wales Central, Neil McAvoy, joined me earlier. He's called for a public flotilla to blockade the dumping site, and he accused EDF of misleading the public.
The mud has not been tested properly. Let's go back to the very beginning in 2009. There were only 5 samples taken beneath 5 centimetres. And the danger area, according to scientists, is roughly 50 centimetres. There were higher levels of radioactivity, as shown in the results, and we wanted to scrutinise the raw data, and we were then told that the raw data was disposed of. It had been destroyed. The most worrying thing of all is that we have now found out, as admitted by Magnox Limited, that there were accidents in cooling ponds in the late 1960s with weapon-grade plutonium. And what scientists like the Emeritus Professor Keith Barnum of Imperial College London say is that plutonium particles, as a result, may now be in that mud. And what is absolutely scandalous, and it's the most scandalous thing I've come across in 30 years in politics...
Well, we know that EDF are not here to defend themselves. You're now calling for a people's flotilla to blockade the dumping ground. If you're afraid of this earth being radioactive, aren't you actually putting people's health at risk by getting them even closer to it?
The very sad fact now is that the mud being dumped, the particles from that mud are migrating up to 10 miles inland, which is an absolute scandal of a potential scandal of public health. I intend to board a boat, as do many others, because we want to stand up for Wales, we want to stand up for our country and put a stop to this disgraceful dumping of material about which we know virtually nothing. It's an absolute scandal.
But what we have heard is a very robust defence of the position, saying there's absolutely no risk to anybody. Is this just a question of you simply not liking earth coming from Somerset, from the Somerset coast over to Wales, and it's in effect a NIMBYism attitude?
Not at all, no. First of all, I would say that Wales is not a dumping ground for England, but with this matter, also the people in the west of England may well be affected. All you have to do is consult with nuclear physicists, ask them about how you test for plutonium particles, and they will tell you that you need alpha spectrometry and mass spectrometry.
But it's quite extraordinary, despite everything you say and all your concerns, and still yet to be proved, of course, because you say you're waiting for extensive tests to back up your theory and your concerns. But isn't it interesting, though, that officially this project is supporting the livelihoods of Welsh employees? Surely nobody would be put at risk if the government or the local authorities had any sense that there was any sense of risk whatsoever to those people working on this, this mud site.
Well, the issue is we don't know because the testing has not been done.
Well, we put all the allegations made in that interview to EDF Energy, and they told us that they stand by their original statement. The US ambassador to NATO has threatened Russia with preemptive engagement over some of its missiles. She says that Washington could strike to take them out as they're in breach of a Cold War-era treaty. The threat was seen as the first of its kind in terms of military action in over 2 decades.
The countermeasures would be to take out the missiles that are in development by Russia in violation of the treaty.
Well, it's essentially a warning from Moscow. The US envoy to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, has said if Russia does not put a stop to its covert development of a banned cruise missile system, then the US will seek to destroy it before it's operational. The US believe that Russia is working on a ground launch system that would have the ability to launch a nuclear strike on Europe on short notice. Now, the development of such a system would be in breach of a Cold War treaty. This is the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. It was signed by President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev in 1987. Now, while Ambassador Hutchinson said that the US favours a diplomatic solution should any situation arise, she also added that America is not against moving forward with developments not allowed by the treaty right now. We can hear more of what she had to say.
Getting them to withdraw would be our choice, of course. But I think the question was, what would you do if this continues to a point where we know that they are capable of delivering? And at that point, we would then be looking at a capability to take out a missile that could hit any of our countries in Europe and hit America in Alaska.
It's not the first time such accusations have been made, and Moscow has consistently denied any such violations. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has also weighed in. He's spoken of concerns for what he calls Russia's lack of respect for its international commitments. But such finger-pointing, we should point out, is nothing new when it comes to violations of this treaty. Reports in The Telegraph almost a year ago claimed that the US is already developing its own ground-based cruise missile in breach of the historic accord.
International affairs expert Jonathan Steele told us that neither side is in possession of all the facts.
It's very hard to know exactly what the range of different missiles is until there are lots of test flights and you can measure what the impact was and whether they did in fact have the range that's alleged. So the Russians so far are just denying it, which is fairly a way of keeping cool. If the Russians were trying to threaten in some return way, then we would be really worried. But at the moment, it's a one-sided accusation and a denial on the other side.
Cambridge University plans to open its doors to students from disadvantaged backgrounds who haven't met the entry requirements. Vice-Chancellor Stephen Toop has announced a £500 million scheme to help diversify the university. Students who perform well at interview but miss the grades will be asked to do a foundation year to help them reach the high standards set by the university. In recent years, Cambridge and Oxford have been accused of not being diverse enough. Between 2010 and 2015, around 80% of Cambridge students had parents with professional jobs. Yet another famous monument is on the chopping block. Campaigners are calling for a statue of Oliver Cromwell outside the Houses of Parliament to be removed. Jeremy Crick, a social historian, compared Cromwell to the Taliban in Afghanistan for his anti-religious views. He also claims Cromwell was responsible for the destruction of religious buildings by the paramilitary troops during the English Civil War. Crick said that unloved statues should be removed and stored together to be displayed in the future. But critics say he's attempting to rewrite history. The Cromwell statue isn't the first to cause controversy. Similar debates have raged in other cities too. In Bristol, a row erupted over plans to add an enslaver of Africans plaque to a statue of philanthropist and slave trader Edward Colston. Outside the House of Lords, attempts to relocate a statue of suffragette Emmeline Pankhurst were thwarted by campaigners who called the plan an act of vandalism. Students at Manchester University painted over a so-called racist poem by Rudyard Kipling with one by American civil rights activist Maya Angelou. And a campaign by students at Oxford University failed to remove a statue of imperialist Cecil Rhodes. So should controversial statues be removed? To debate this, I was joined by military historian and author Ricky D. Phillips and the organiser of Decolonise This Place, Amin Hussain.
It's not about rewriting history, it's the recognition that there are other histories being erased in the process of writing that history, and it's often written by the victor or those who are holding power.
Okay, Ricky, so there we are, glorifying the past. In effect, Cromwell is accused of war crimes, religious persecution, ethnic cleansing. It is a statue celebrating those things, isn't it? He's got a point, has Amin.
To be perfectly honest, I mean, probably to paraphrase Cromwell himself, I beseech you to think you might be mistaken. Cromwell was a lot of those things to a lot of people, but he was also a two-time member of Parliament. He was Lord Protector of the Realm. He was an outstanding military commander. Why not have him outside Parliament, where he not only served as Parliament, but obviously he created, in effect, what we now have as a constitutional monarchy, which is the makeup of the UK, of our entire political system. There's absolutely no reason to pull him down. And to be honest, I think it's irresponsible history. If we start pulling down statues and we say, well, this incited hate or this is reminiscent of hate, you'll get that hate.
I mean, what do you make of that? Irresponsible?
No, I don't think it's responsible at all. Irresponsible. I think, look, it's the nature of our times. Those were different times. The question of us as a society is, what are we glorifying? What are we keeping in place that then perpetuates the same things that we say we stand against?
But are we glorifying? Are we not recognising what happened in the context of that history? Many of these figures, slave traders, imperialists, religious zealots, anti-religious zealots, they lived in very different times to us. We're not actually saying we're glorifying them now. We can't simply judge them by today's standards.
No, I mean, look, I don't think that's true, because in fact, we are still suffering from the consequences of things in the past. Again, recognizing the specificity of the UK, but we're seeing something across the globe. The Gandhi monument in South Africa was taken down. This is part of the conversation and the consciousness that's rising. You can say you're against racism or against religious intolerance, but then you say, oh, well, this person was complicated, he did some good things. It's not just about who we're glorifying, is how do these things in our society maintain the structures that oppress us, while simultaneously knowing, as a Palestinian, for example, or other black people here, rarely do we see a monument of a black figure.
Ricky, what do you make of that?
And next, obviously, I'm assuming that Amin wants them to pull down the pyramids, which were built entirely with slave labour. So I think that all of a sudden we basically just go back and wreck all of history just to bleach it out. It seems to be fair to one person or one area of society when it's convenient. And I'm terribly sorry to tell everyone and to tell Amin that history isn't convenient, and history isn't there to be convenient to you. History is history. As a historian, we study it, the good, the bad, warts and all, as Cromwell himself said. We don't, as historians, get the luxury of opinion, and we're there to study all of it. And if we were to bleach every single thing we don't like, then, or that isn't convenient to us, I guarantee you that's oppressive and inconvenient to someone else.
That's all for this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. Next, Stacey and Max discuss the rise of zombie corporations. That's on the Kaiser Report after a short break. From all of us here in Westminster, have a good night.
At Glasses Direct, all of these glasses are 2 pairs for £19, including lenses. You should go direct to glassesdirect.co.uk.
Please, can you come to my room? And he just makes me do things I just don't want to do. Sometimes I'm scared.
Over 500,000 children suffer abuse and neglect a year in the UK. But there is something we can all do. Please leave a gift in your will to the NSPCC and help be there for every child. Become a guardian for future generations. Search NSPCC Guardians to request your free legacy information pack.
I discovered a fair casino that gives money to the players, win or lose. And now I've found my Ojo. Find your Ojo at playojo.com.
If you've thought about buying gold or silver bars and coins, it's so easy to buy direct, safely and securely from Direct Bullion, with fast and free, fully insured delivery on UK orders, and all parcels discreetly packaged and delivered to your door. Direct Bullion aims to provide a gold standard customer service with glowing 5-star reviews and a top recommended precious metals dealer by the Spears 500. Go online or call 0800 055 7050 to receive our expert guide to buying gold or silver.
What a trade price that is!
Really looks to business.
What a van, what a van, what a van! Lisa Van and Rama Van.
Hi, I'm Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. Have you ever stopped to consider how dirty the word saliva sounds? I have. Stacey.
Max, the audience doesn't know what you're talking about, but they'll know what I'm talking about. I'm going to talk about zombies. I have a lot of zombification in my headlines.
Love zombies!
This is a course. The entertainment industry has reflected the society around it in terms of having all of these zombie films. Well, the rise of the zombie corporations percentage keeps increasing. BIS explains why. Zombie firms are on the rise and survive longer. This is according to the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks. And by zombie firms, they mean that firms that are unable to cover debt servicing costs from current profits over an extended period. And they now say that globally, the number of zombie firms is over 12%. But in the US, it's approaching 15% of all firms cannot meet current debt cost from current profit.
This comes from zombie banks. Okay, the zombie bank plague has spilled over to zombie corporations. What is a zombie bank? A zombie bank is a bank that's technically insolvent, but it's kept alive by bailouts, continuing rolling bailouts from the central banks because of their friends in the banks, the commercial banks, the Lloyds, the HSBC, the BNP, the Citibank. They're technically insolvent, but they're kept alive, even though they're zombies, through the perpetual rolling of bailouts they call quantitative easing or some other name that they come up with every few months. This has spilled over now to the general economy and the corporations listed on the S&P 500. These are, in fact, companies that cannot maintain their viability through profits, as that word is understood, that you're selling stuff for more than it costs. They are reliant entirely on blood transfusions. This is a vampire economy. This is a Frankenstein economy. This is a zombie economy. And of course, the pop culture reflects this. As Bob Prechter has been saying since the 1980s, the pop culture zeitgeist is reflected in the markets. Zombies are hot in Hollywood because we live in a world of zombies.
And because the zombie banks became zombies after eating basically the flesh, the actual living beings that were the workers, the productivity, the wealth of all our pension funds. And it's the zombie pension funds and their looming, frightening monster debt obligations that they owe their members of the pension fund that is feeding these zombies as well, because as the BIS points out, their analysis suggests that the increase is linked to reduced financial pressure, which in turn seems to reflect in part the effects of lower interest rates. So interest rates are so low, pension funds gamble on the fact that they have an 8% annual return. Most of their investment has to go into safe investments like bonds, and the bonds are yielding ever lower because there's ever more basically returns that these pension funds need.
It's the reverse Olympics. Yeah. They keep lowering the bar, and the winner is the fattest and most slothful. That's the economy we're living in. Zombies. It reminds me of the Cranberries, that song Zombie. Yes. And their guns and their bombs. So dramatic. Nonsense. I mean, Irish rock was so great for a while there, and then they became a zombie economy, didn't they? Because the banks were allowed to create total mayhem there. Oh, well.
Well, as you see from the chart, zombies are crowding the S&P 500. So that's the yellow line as it's rising along with the S&P 1500. I'm sorry about that. But, speaking of zombies, everybody here is so partisan, and everybody thinks those people in the Midwest, they're deplorables, they're losers, as Hillary Clinton might call them. And we on the West Coast and the East Coast are winners, and we're vibrant Hillary voters, and we're better. But when you look at the entire fabric of all these headlines, nobody is an island. They're all part of the same system. So when we have these zombie banks, we have zombie corporations, and we have zombie workers. Now, we have this first headline about these zombie corporations and banks being kept alive by low interest rates. Workers overdose on the job and employers struggle to respond. So I'm going to read you a little bit of a longer text here because you have to listen to this to believe it.
Uh-oh.
It's fascinating and it's a sad story. Jimmy Sullivan prepared for his job as a bricklayer the same way every morning for years, injecting a shot of heroin before leaving his car. The first time he overdosed on the job in 2013 at a Virginia construction site, a coworker who is his cousin stealthily injected a dose of Narcan, an opioid antidote, into Sullivan's leg. He woke up and went straight back to work. The second time, in 2014, his cousin revived him again, and after resting for an hour in his car, Sullivan was back on the job. His boss told him not to let that happen again, but within a month, Sullivan had again overdosed on the job site. This time, another worker called 911. After a few hours in the hospital, he went back to work. So, I mean, here you have a guy shooting up heroin, going to the construction job, overdoses, injected with Narcan, pops up, goes back to the job. It's rinse and repeat. It's the same part. He's part of the economy, which is receiving injections of cash to hide the pain of an economy that doesn't produce wealth anymore, and it merely extracts wealth. So it makes sense that this guy, a bricklayer, the construction, building the foundations of everything you see around you, would also be the same.
Right. So you began that by saying that no man is an island. So the implication there being that the plight of this bricklayer, Jimmy, heroin addict, is mirrored on every part of society and in ever greater organizational paradigms of society. So this one individual is experiencing a hellish life due to the zombification and opiadification of the American economy, but so too are the people of his family and his community and the wider community, and probably in his state, and now the United States of America. His employers
Yep.
are living in this just-in-time, opiate-addicted, minimum wage hellscape brought on by easy money, like easy blood, into the veins of the ever-increasing vampire population and zombie population. And the cure is staring us right in the face. Of course, the obvious cure is you need to make financial fraud more expensive by raising interest rates aggressively to weed out the crooks. That would be the obvious solution. Paul Volcker knows that, but he's not running the Fed anymore. We now have enablers. We have Dr. Frankenstein running the Fed. We have vampires running the central banks. We have Jamie Dimon in charge, Lloyd Blankfein. These are the vampires of last resort. They are the deepest, foulest, stankest.
So
We've
now
ever
we don't see any of these conversations anymore. In America, we used to have on television back in the 60s and 70s, we used to have deeper conversations, what our society should be, what sort of economy should we have. Part of this situation here is construction workers have the highest death rate of opioid overdose on the job. They're the second most concentrated. The only other industry that has more opioid addicts is the entertainment industry, according to this chart, but to this data. But construction workers, what happens is they lose their job if they're not on the job. You know, it's a vicious, you have to show up at the job. And a lot of them, it's obviously very labor intensive. You're using hammers, nails.
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous. So they have a lot of medical issues of pain. So they've got to get on the job. They take the opioid to get onto the job because it's the only way to get through the pain. And, maybe the conversation should be had of, okay, there's on the one hand, you need to feed the, stock markets and you need the revenue of pushing the opioids. But on the other hand, we also need to discuss, is there a better way to have this? Should workers have some workers' comp? Should they have the day off? Should they have a week off or 2 weeks off instead to recover from the pain? Should they not be threatened with losing their job because they have this pain? And maybe there are other conversations that could be had, but we don't have those conversations because it's all shrieking and it's all crazy.
Did you see the story that the gig economy, like Uber drivers, their revenue in the last 5 years have been cut in half?
That's actually, I have a headline: drivers for Uber, Lyft are earning less than half of what they did 4 years ago. Study finds it's a study by JP Morgan. By the way, the biggest zombie of all the banks, the biggest derivatives book of all the banks, the one that benefits the most from 0% interest rates and Fed chairmen and women going out saying, oh, we should buy equities in the next financial crash.
Right. Well, there's an amendment to the Constitution outlawing slavery. And that's clearly an example of slavery in America right here.
Well, I don't think they're forced to do that, but it is definitely a declining income, and it's only going to add to the sense of, the harder you work, the more you stay in place. We've covered the Red Queen syndrome and fracking. You got to keep on working just to make that bond payment. Otherwise, your flow of cash is going to be cut off if you don't make that bond payment. And forget the fact that fracking doesn't make money. Forget the fact that you're driving faster and faster and harder and more fares and earning less and less.
Another thing all these people have in common is that they're generally carrying a lot of debt, a lot of student debt, a lot of medical debt. Okay.
The debt for their car, the auto loan
debt. Okay. So we know from history that forced labor a lot of times comes with debt, peonage.
Well,
People are
I like the analogy I have for the show better, and I think it's working. The zombie story, you could introduce the slave story to another episode, but I think this fits and it's suitable. I think that the zombie works. In fact, that we have a 0% interest rate economy because we have zombie banks. That is filtered down to zombie corporations because pension funds need to meet their their pension obligations, payouts to their members. So they have to loan more and more money to more and more zombie corporations in order to keep their flow to their members. Those same workers need to work harder and harder to pay off the debts for all of their student loans, their mortgages, which house prices continue to rise. So that works better for me.
Well, maybe we've invented something new.
What?
Zombie slaves. You know, the best of both worlds, or the worst of both worlds, depending on how you look at it. But as far as content goes, it could be good.
So a new report from JPMorgan Chase based on payments directed to 2.3 million families showed that the average monthly platform earnings dropped considerably by 53% between 2013 and 2017. These drivers made $783 per month in 2017 versus $1,469 in 2013. So like I said, working harder to pay the debts. In Uber and Lyft, that's a definite situation where you can keep the hamster on the wheel, like running faster because you have so much debts in order to have the job. You have to pay the gasoline. You have to pay the insurance.
And what's standing behind all this is prison, right? Remember, if you get into debt too much, you go to prison.
Anyway, the overall story is that this is a zombie economy. Zombie, zombie, zombie. It's like they keep on coming up. You have to get up. No matter how many times you die on the job of a heroin overdose, you got to pay your credit card bill at the end of the day. So you got to inject with Narcan and get up and go to the second half.
Don't go away.
Homecomings and goings are so much easier with a Crocodile automatic garage door. Smart in appearance and ingeniously space-saving in operation. Adding style, security, and perhaps even value to your home, it's the perfect combination of design and function. Call Crocodile on 08000 112234 and find out how quick and easy they are to install and improve your family home Crocodile style.
If you've thought about buying gold or silver bars and coins, it's so easy to buy direct, safely and securely from Direct Bullion, with fast and free, fully insured delivery on UK orders, and all parcels discreetly packaged and delivered to your door. Direct Bullion aims to provide a gold standard customer service with glowing 5-star reviews and a top recommended precious metals dealer by the Spears 500. Go online or call 0800 055 7050 to receive our expert guide to buying gold or silver.
Please, can you help come into my room? And he just makes me do things I just don't want to do. I'm scared.
Over 500,000 children suffer abuse and neglect a year in the UK. But there is something we can all do. Please leave a gift in your will to the NSPCC and help be there for every child. Become a guardian for future generations. Search NSPCC Guardians to request your free legacy information pack.
What politicians do is something we don't do. They put themselves on the line, and they get accepted or rejected. So when you want to be president, why would you want to be? Why would someone want to be president? What's it like to be president? What's it like when the phone rings at 3 in the morning? Can't be a good call. I'm interested always in the whys and the hows. And Q Larry. Question more.
Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Let's talk to Mitch Firestein in New York. Mitch, welcome back to the Kaiser Report.
How are you, Max?
Pretty good. You know, I saw a statistic recently that the world is now debt to GDP, something like 250%. The Planet Ponzi theme that you outline in your book has been growing unabated now for years, and the total debt to GDP in the entire world is 250%. It's incredibly big. And yet now we see maybe a new trend in that rates are starting to inch up. Quantitative tightening, the reverse of quantitative easing. What's happening, Mitch? What's going on here?
Well, is it really? But Max, I've told you a billion times, you can never, never taper a Ponzi scheme. And this is the motherlode of Ponzi schemes. So what's going on? Maybe the Federal Reserve, with a reckless policy and abandon, where they've reduced rates from 15% down to 0, they claim that they're going to be raising rates, but it's still statistically insignificant, the amount that they're raising. So all they're doing is replacing, there are two forms of policy easing. There's monetary policy and fiscal policy. So they're getting rid of the monetary policy, but they're adding fiscal policy. So fiscal policy, government spending, is replacing monetary policy. They're also reinvesting the bond proceeds. So it's like a mini QE. So it really appears, the optics are that they may be tightening, but they're not really tightening.
The language is that we're tightening, and yet that debt number keeps going higher and higher. So as you point out, it's all optics. Now, the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of central bank, report that 15% of all U.S. corporations are zombie firms, unable to cover their debt servicing costs from the current profits. Your thoughts on what's happening here?
Well, I think that we're living in a land of unicorns, zombies, managed by a bunch of snowflakes who don't understand valuation. So the problem with Wall Street right now is you've got too many people involved in the same crowded trades. The ETF trade is a horrible trade. You know, it's like a roach motel. You can get in, but there's no exit once you're in. Valuations, people don't understand valuations. I mean, you've got some ridiculously priced stocks. Like, I think we've got a couple charts here today. We've got a chart of Amazon that you can take a look at. Amazon is $1 trillion company, but they don't make any sort of profit, which is necessary if you're going to maintain that kind of valuation. So anybody who's buying Amazon, the most crowded trade in the world, good luck to you. You know, I think that's going to end very, very badly. I mean, debt is
we'll look at the Amazon chart, but let's talk about another company we've mentioned before, Tesla. So the thing about Tesla, Mitch, you know, you're on Wall Street. I used to work on Wall Street for many years. They seem very lax about the rules, particularly regarding the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. So when Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, says something like, I'm thinking about taking myself private and funding is in place, I think in the old days you used to get what's called a Wells notice, right? I mean, the SEC comes after you. They used to be illegal to do that stuff, right?
Well, what you're talking about, securities fraud, and is Elon Musk guilty of securities fraud? Yes, he is. Will they enforce it? I'm not sure. Now, you know, it's a classic. What are the setup signs for a classic Ponzi scheme? You've got corporates. Look at the chart. You've got corporates and investors selling and millennials buying the stock. The problem is you can't really tell what the finances of Tesla are. They've never made a profit. They've got around $11 billion in debt. They've got to increase their debt even more. The company is hemorrhaging money. It's burning. Its cash burn is hotter than SpaceX jet fuel. So it's impossible to really tell. You know, Musk came out and said that funding is secured when he had no funding. He was just trying to burn the shorts. Basically, that's market manipulation in my book. I don't know why people are buying the stock. It's probably one of the best shorts on the planet at over $300 a share. I mean, on that Ponzi scheme message that he put out, the stock went up. He said that there was going to be a buyout at $420 a share, and I think it topped out at around $395. And then when he had to admit that it was a lie, you know, the shares collapsed. But you know, I think that's a small time Ponzi swindle compared to what's out there now. I think there are a lot of bigger problems. If you look at total corporate debt, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 trillion in the United States. And I think around 4.5 or 5 trillion of those bonds have to be refinanced within the next 5 years.
Right. So that's a good point in that whatever you think Elon Musk is doing, if it's illegal or not, it's in the context of an entire global market that is, according to Planet Ponzi, engaged in much bigger frauds and involve all the central banks and trillions of dollars. So he's a small fish. It's just a $40–50 billion bezel, whereas various central banks are involved in much bigger scams. Now, at the same time, the Bloomberg's Consumer Confidence Comfort Index, now at its highest level since January of 2001. So consumers seem happy, Mitch. The wealth effect has kicked in. You know, stocks are higher, property market's higher. People feel wealthy. They're confident. They're buying stuff. What's going on there?
Well, look, this is a rally that was sustained by reckless central bank policies around the world. You had the Bank of Japan kicking it off, buying all the ETFs in the Japanese market and buying all the bonds in that market. You've got the European Central Bank, run by Mario Draghi, who's ex-Goldman Sachs, buying all the corporate bonds in the European market that are highly rated, supposedly, and the government bonds. They're spending an inordinate amount of money trying to prop up these markets. It's supporting the markets and keeping interest rates artificially low. The problem is Italy has $4 trillion in sovereign debt that the banks are sopping up. So the banks are largely insolvent and need to be recapitalized in Italy. Italy is a huge problem, and it could be the wheel that falls off the cart that makes the EU crash. So the debt in the European Union is out supersized, and I don't see a quick solution to that. So I think Europe's going to be a bit of a problem.
Right. Well, they got this idea of the zombie banks that were kept afloat by the central banks because they didn't want to have any problems with their friends in the banks. But this is bleeded into corporate zombies. So you have corporate zombies. They can't meet their interest payments. They are relying on bailouts as well. And so what you're describing there is this kind of contagion, if you will, of insolvency that's spreading with kind of a hidden under a rising stock price. So the stock prices are going higher through stock repurchase programs and through the use of this funny money that's being printed. So on the surface, it looks like things are good. Donald Trump will point to the stock market and say, see, look, things are going great. But underneath the surface, there's a plague of insolvency, and that insolvency bubble, when pricked, should be pretty catastrophic. And you're saying then Italy, that I mean, the EU is a $17 trillion piece of the global economy. So I mean, how are the banks in the EU doing, like Deutsche Bank and these other banks? I can't imagine they're doing very well. Let's look. You mentioned Amazon before being a $1 trillion company. Apple is now a $1 trillion company as well. That's U.S. dollars, not Zimbabwe dollars. And I remember back in the dot-com boom, we had Cisco was going to be the first $1 trillion company before it flamed out a famously 90% crash. Where is this going? Is Amazon and these companies going to $2 trillion, or is there going to be a flame out?
Well, you touched upon something that's interesting. No, I think there'll definitely be a flame out. I think Amazon, Netflix are two of the biggest flames that don't make money that will flame out, and Tesla, Musk should go to jail. But what's happening is a lot of these companies are issuing tons of debt, either corporate debt or they're raising finance in other methods. And what they're using it for is financialization. They're not using it to create productivity. So what they're doing with the stock buybacks is they're cannibalizing future earnings and paying off the CEO suite. That never ends well in history. It never has. And where we're seeing this most pronounced right now, and where we're seeing inflation, is it's been exported by the West. So although we're seeing this QE tightening in the US, where it's really impacting is where all the speculative cash ran out of the US markets into submerging emerging markets like Turkey, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Venezuela. Now remember, Turkey's debt is dollar denominated, a lot of it. So their currency's dropped about 30% this year, and their economy has gone right down the tank. The same with Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. So their dollar denominated debt is 40% more, they have 40% more debt now, yet their GDP and production can't support even the debt service that they had. And as interest rates go up, we're going to see a chain of defaults, which is going to lead the dominoes to fall. So I don't know if the submerging emerging markets will lead this. I don't know if the EU will lead it. or a crisis in China, because China is a big problem with all the debt that China has. That's a big red Ponzi in China right now.
All right, let's look at these central banks again and continue on this theme. So to keep the zombie banks going, they buy the debt of the zombie banks. You talk about Mario Draghi, you talk about the EU, you talk about the central banks inflating their balance sheet by trillions of dollars or trillions of euros. And there's another trend, though, which is pernicious and ugly and disgusting, and that is central banks buying stock. So the Swiss National Bank is the biggest owner, one of the biggest owners of Apple stock. The Japanese central bank's been buying stock on the Japanese market to keep it floating. And now the head of the Federal Reserve Bank here in the U.S. is talking about when the next crisis hits, they're going to start buying stock in the open market. Mitch, your thoughts?
Well, you know, this is a big problem, doing 90% of what they're doing right now. But what you've got economic charlatans at the wheel here that are going to run us back into a ditch. But then when they create a problem, you go to the same guys. You know, it's like Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting to get a different result. Obviously, the result's going to be the same. But what we need to do is think out of the box and get different people to try to change the program. You know, we have too much debt, too much credit and leverage that caused the crisis, right? Now we've got more debt, more credit, and more leverage than we had back in 2000. It's going to end differently. It's going to end catastrophically. Student loans are at an all-time high. The default rate is at an all-time high. It's closing in on $2 trillion, right? So we've got that. We've got record credit card debt. That's the only thing that's sustaining this rally right now. And, you know, the share buyback programs are ridiculous, Max. You mentioned it yourself. So, you know, if you have 100 shares and you earn $1 a share, right, that's $100 in earnings. And then if you buy back 50 shares and you make the same $100, you just doubled your earnings. What did you really double your earnings? Productivity didn't double. That's only financialization. And that's a lot of the magic smoke and mirrors that we see going on. And, you know, I'll digress a bit back to Tesla. You know,
no, we won't digress, Mitch, because we've only got a few seconds. So, in fact, I'm going to say thanks for being on the Kaiser Report and see you again soon.
Okay, Max. Thanks a lot.
All right, great. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Mitch Firestein of Planet Ponzi. If you want to catch us on Twitter, of course, it's Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.
What a trade price that is.
Really looks the business.
What a van, what a van, what a van. Lisa Van and Rama Van.
At Glasses Direct, all of these glasses are 2 pairs for £19, including lenses. You should go direct to glassesdirect.co.uk.
Homecomings and goings are so much easier with a Crocodile automatic garage door. Smart in appearance and ingeniously space-saving in operation. Adding style, security, and perhaps even value to your home, it's the perfect combination of design and function. Call Crocodile on 08000 112234 and find out how quick and easy they are to install and improve your family home Crocodile style.
I discovered a fair casino with no wagering requirements ever. And now I've found my Ojo. Find your Ojo at playojo.com.
If you've thought about buying gold or silver bars and coins, it's so easy to buy direct, safely and securely from Direct Bullion, with fast and free, fully insured delivery on UK orders, and all parcels discreetly packaged and delivered to your door. Direct Bullion aims to provide a gold standard customer service with glowing 5-star reviews and a top recommended precious metals dealer by the Spears 500. Go online or call 0800 055 7050 to receive our expert guide to buying gold or silver.
Feel outside when you're in and inside when you're out with a Crocodile glass veranda. A solid open structure with a glass roof, it's quickly and easily constructed using powder-coated aluminium. So it's maintenance-free and built to last. Call 08000 112200 to find out more about the elegant, bespoke Crocodile glass veranda and improve your family home Crocodile style.
Civil war in Africa's newest country claims close to 400,000 lives, according to a US-funded report, prompting the question, where has the initial support for South Sudan gone? Also ahead, America's NATO ambassador scrambles to clarify herself after she threatened that Washington would take out Russia's missile stockpile, accusing Moscow of violating a major Cold War-era treaty. A struggle between empathy and law unfolds in Italy as a pro-refugee mayor is placed under house arrest for allegedly helping illegal immigrants. And the People's Republic of Jam Jar, a prominent Conservative Party politician in the UK, is under fire after making that insensitive quip about Libya. They're live worldwide from Moscow. This is RT International, your hourly news with me, Colin Bray. Welcome to the programme. The number of deaths from the civil war in the Central African nation of South Sudan has reached almost 400,000. That was revealed in a damning new report that says the figure is almost 8 times higher than previously thought. It's also a long way from the hope that surrounded the country's declaration of independence in 2011. The United States was quick to support Africa's newest nation then, but how long did that help continue? Caleb Maupin reports.
South Sudan is the youngest country in the world, and according to a new report from the U.S. State Department, it's off to a pretty bleak start. Almost 400,000 people killed, half of them killed in the conflict, the other half dying of hunger and disease. Now, previously, prior to this report, the estimates had only been in the tens of thousands, but now it looks like the numbers of deaths in South Sudan are approaching the number that have died in the conflict in Syria. Pretty bleak, but it wasn't always like this. Now, in the 1990s, there was no South Sudan. Sudan was one country, and it was embroiled in the longest-running civil war in the continent. However, there were some perks. At that point, Sudan had lots of oil to sell, and China was pouring in investments. And that is when the sanctions rolled in. Sudan was declared to be a state sponsor of terror. Bill Clinton bombed a factory in 1998 that he said was making chemical weapons.
Our forces also attacked a factory in Sudan associated with the bin Laden network. The factory was involved in the production of materials for chemical weapons.
But actually, the factory was just making medicine. No evidence of chemical weapons has ever been produced. Now, the USA pushed for South Sudan's independence. In 2011, the USA hailed South Sudan for breaking away and becoming a new country.
We warmly welcome the Republic of South Sudan into the community of sovereign nations.
But the euphoria did not last long.
It breaks my heart to see what South Sudan has become today.
The country fell into a civil war between rival clans. The president turned against the vice president, and mass killings and hunger ensued. And all this killing was a headache for the United Nations. So, with a new administration now in the White House, the U.S. role in South Sudan is being reassessed.
The United States government will not continue in a partnership with leaders who are only interested in perpetuating an endless war characterized by ethnically motivated atrocities. The government of South Sudan has lost credibility, and the United States is losing patience.
Yes, South Sudan is yet another example of the U.S. State Department telling us that they're going to go rescue some poor oppressed people on the other side of the planet. And then they're left spending money to analyze results, showing that the conditions overall are getting a lot worse.
To an extent, the world seemed to have forgotten about South Sudan. Not too long ago, it was the world that was rallying together to form this new nation, then at the expense of northern Sudan, which was run by Bashir. And it would appear that petty politics between the Chinese and the US in terms of their respective influences on those countries have meant that, for now at least, the world seems to have forgotten about the Sudan crisis, seems to have forgotten about the displacement of people, women and children, and displacement of children across the nation, and it's very much an impoverished state. And of course, we know that a lot of things do not work effectively in South Sudan, and for all intents and purposes, the West and the international community seems to have turned a blind eye.
The US ambassador to NATO is denying that she suggested carrying out a preemptive strike against Russia. She'd earlier told a news conference in Brussels about taking out missiles in development by Russia, claiming they're in breach of a Cold War-era treaty.
Well, the countermeasures would be to take out the missiles that are in development by Russia in violation of the treaty. So that would be the countermeasure eventually.
Well, commenting on the ambassador's statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said that public officials should be more careful when it comes to aggressive rhetoric. More details now from Nikki Aaron.
Well, it's essentially a warning from Moscow. The US envoy to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, has said if Russia does not put a stop to its covert development of a banned cruise missile system, then the US will seek to destroy it before it's operational. The US believe that Russia is working on a ground launch system that would have the ability to launch a nuclear strike on Europe on short notice. Now, the development of such a system would be in breach of a Cold War treaty. This is the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. It was signed by President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev in 1987. Now, while Ambassador Hutchinson said that the US favors a diplomatic solution should any situation arise, she also added that America is not against moving forward with developments not allowed by the treaty right now. We can
Getting them to withdraw would be our choice, of course. But I think the question was, what would you do if this continues to a point where we know that they are capable of delivering? And at that point, we would then be looking at a capability to take out a missile that could hit any of our countries in Europe and hit America and Alaska.
It's not the first time such accusations have been made, and Moscow has consistently denied any such violations. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has also weighed in. He's spoken of concerns for what he calls Russia's lack of respect for its international commitments. But such finger-pointing, we should point out, is nothing new when it comes to violations of this treaty. Reports in the Telegraph almost a year ago claimed that the US is already developing its own ground-based cruise missile in breach of the historic accord.
A prominent MP for Britain's ruling Conservative Party is under fire after he made a joking reference to Libya. Jacob Rees-Mogg called the African state the people's jar or something at his party's annual conference.
All the countries that are least interested in their people call themselves peoples, don't they? People's Republican jam jar or something like that of Libya was what it was called when Colonel Gaddafi was in charge.
This is quite a bizarre comment to be heard from a well-known politician referencing another nation. This was indeed hardline Brexiteer and Tory MP Jacob Rees-Mogg speaking on the sidelines of the annual Conservative Party conference. And what he was actually referencing was the Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya, which is roughly translated as state of masses. And that's what the North African nation of Libya used to be called under Muammar Gaddafi. Yet he chose those words instead, and reaction was very swift to follow.
Dearie me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, your first attempt at global diplomacy has failed in a bit of casual racism. Did you and Boris Johnson have the same geography teacher at Eton College? Maybe now is the time to learn some respect for other countries.
Little Englander Jacob Rees-Mogg shows his disdain for the rest of the world. This tawdry Tory government has had its time. Britain deserves better than this inward-looking bunch of unworldly has-beens and never-weres.
This sort of remark is becoming too common from the Brexiteers, coming as it does in the wake of Boris's recent burqa jibes. Insulting other people is not the way I want my country represented, and the public see it for what it is: petty politics.
The reason those Boris Johnson burqa jibes and Boris Johnson in general get mentioned in a few of those reactions is because the former UK Foreign Secretary has himself come under fire on many occasions for quite controversial comments. With the burqas, he had just recently compared women wearing them to letterboxes, causing quite a bit of controversy here in the UK. But with these latest comments on Libya, they do seem quite strange indeed, especially given the role that Britain had played in the destiny of Libya as a nation.
Arab affairs writer Abdul Bari Atwan believes this kind of language can be heard all through British politics and society.
British politicians should be ashamed of themselves. Ashamed of themselves because actually they intervened by military means to destroy countries under false accusation, and they use these lies of weapon of mass destruction, which we discovered it is a pure lie, and then they repeated the same thing and attacked Libya, changed the regime there, and left the country in completely anarchy. This is the problem of British people, British politicians. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should actually realize that the third world country, African countries, are aware of what is happening in the world, and they don't believe all their talks about democracy or about human